Hey, I'm Coach Jay with Blue57 Scouting News. I am joined with Lexus Ortiz in New York City. Good morning, Lexus. How are you doing?
Good morning, Coach Jay. I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, doing good. Low 60s down here in Jacksonville, Florida right now. We got the good weather. Um, Wanted to talk to you about Lovie Smith getting fired at Illinois. I think we're into Power 5 coaches have gotten fired now. And Lovie Smith was a guy that we know in Florida pretty well because he was the head coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a while. Um, he's really loved down here, a strict disciplinarian kind of coach. But Illinois decided to part ways with him and wanted to kind of get your take on that.
Lovie Smith, great coach. When you're put into programs that need just a little bit more structure to be able to compete in their conference, it's kind of difficult. And I think, the athletic department, the boosters, they gave him 5 seasons to try to build that type of structure for that team, but he wasn't able to do it. This season, he had a 2-5 record, which obviously is not well. And overall, the team record was 1739. So that right there, obviously, nobody's going to tolerate that, despite your great coaching ethics. And even if the program wasn't that good to begin with, they just expect you to bring that to the plate when they hire you. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to do it.
They want to see somewhere around year 4 and year 5 that the program is turning, that you're
Mhm.
going to be finishing out top third of your conference, and it just wasn't happening. It's all about getting those playmakers.
Yeah.
And
Feel about them firing him right before the last game of the season? I think, honestly, they could have just let him finish out. I don't know what their method was there, thinking if they could just like see how the team was without him or.
well, they've already hired Brett Belima to replace him, and maybe they felt like if they didn't make that happen quick, that he might go to somewhere else.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of what was going on there. I mean, nobody really knows what's going on behind the scenes with the athletic directors and the boosters, but the reality is, if you're not winning enough games, they start getting on the phone, they start raising money, and they
Mhm.
start buying out contracts. So,
Yeah.
with Gus Malzahn up at Auburn, he's getting a $21.5 million payout. I got a feeling he's not going to coach for a little while. I think he'll take it easy, maybe at least a year. But the truth is, he doesn't ever have to coach again if he chooses not to, with that kind of money. And I'm sure his wife would enjoy having him around the house some. So, being interested to see with Lovie Smith, he's a little bit older, so it'll be interesting to see what happens to him. He's a great defensive coordinator. He might end up getting a defensive coordinator job somewhere else. We'll see.
Mhm.
So
As long-
anyway,
yeah. In the coaching area, I think that's good for him. Obviously, he won't be a head coach anymore, but as long as like he's still involved.
yeah, I mean, he's a guy that played in the NFL for years, I believe, for the Chicago Bears. So he's got he has a reputation, and he loves, it's his passion. So he still has a lot to give. Um, and I think Saban's 70 years old. Saban's right in that 70-year-old. So, Lovie Smith, I think is 62, 63. So he's still got a few more years. He gets some good coaching in there. Um, so I know we had signing day on Wednesday, and Samuel's been following all of that stuff pretty closely. Curious to hear his take on how everything finished out and how the numbers shaped out.
Samuel's going to update us now. Hi, Samuel. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Great.
Good. So not well in the top 10. There was a couple changes in the past week. Obviously, a lot of signings, and we can go through kind of where teams sit in regards to the commits that they have and then signing. So Alabama had 2 new commits: Keanu Cott, who is a 6'4" defensive end from Florida, and JoJo Earl, who's a 5'9" wide receiver from Texas. He was an LSU flip. So that was the 2 new commits for Alabama. All 24 of their commits have signed. Ohio State had no changes. They still have their 21 commits. All 21 of them signed. Georgia had 1 new commit, and that was Xavier Sorey from IMG Academy. He's a 6'3" linebacker. All 20 of their commits have signed also. Then LSU jumped Georgia. Sorry, I did that wrong. LSU above Georgia. They actually had 3 new commits. LSU. Amani Goodwin, he's a 5'8" running back from Trussville, Alabama. Mason Smith, a 6'5" defensive tackle from Louisiana, and then Demarius McGee, a 6'1" cornerback from Florida. So 19 out of their 22 commits have signed so far. So they've got still 3 to go to sign. Clemson sit at 5th. They jumped Oregon in the rankings. They only had 1 new commit. That was Nathaniel Wiggins. He's a 6'2" cornerback from Atlanta, Georgia. All 18 of their commits have signed also. And then at 6, Oregon had 1 new commit. Jonathan Floth from Upland, California. He's an outside linebacker. He didn't sign. He's the only one yet to sign. He committed, but didn't sign. So 20 out of their 21 commits have signed. Texas A&M, for the first time since we've been speaking about it, jumps into the top 10. They were 15th last week, all the way up to 7th. A lot of movement for them. They had 3 big commits last week, all 3 of them from Texas, and 19 out of 20 of their commits have signed. So they have 1 hard commit that they're waiting to sign. Also, Notre Dame, they're up to 8th. They had a lot of commits as well, up to 27 now. Also, Oklahoma, who were outside of the top 10 for a couple of weeks, got into the top 10 last week, and then now have moved up into 9th. They had a recent commit, Xavier Bird. He's a 6'5" offensive tackle from Duncanville, Texas. 16 out of their 16 have signed as well. And then Florida round out the top 10. They had 1 commit just this past week, Austin Barber, who's a 6'7" offensive tackle from Jacksonville, Florida. So they have 21 out of their 25 signed currently right now. They still have a couple to go to get signed. Notre Dame was the other team that fell out of the top 10, as well as Miami. Oh, sorry. Notre Dame's at 8th. We completely skipped over them. They moved from 10th to 8th. They got Ron Powless III. He's a 6'3" pro-style quarterback. That was actually their second quarterback commit that they got. So 2 quarterback commits for them in the 2021 class. And then so Miami, just outside of the top 10, they got a great commit, and that was Jake Garcia, someone that we had previously talked about. He's the quarterback from California that moved to Georgia and was trying to find somewhere to play this season. Ended up committing and signing for Miami. He's actually the 2nd highest ranked quarterback signee for Miami ever. So that's a big deal for Miami there. USC out of the top 10 as well. They were in the top 10 or thereabouts for a lot of this year. They're at 13. Tennessee moved down 1 place to 15 from 14. And then also North Carolina stay about the same at 14. Texas stay at 17, not a lot of movement there. And same with Ole Miss. They got a lot of commits, but stay around the same. Not a lot of movement in the top 20, really. Maryland was the only one that kind of broke into the top 20. They were 23rd last week, so they sit at 19th right now. I expect this to change a little bit more, but I think it's not as much as we've seen in the last 3 weeks. I think that there's been a lot of changes just with the commits and the flips and stuff like that. But now that a lot of these teams have gotten a lot of signings from their commits, there shouldn't be a lot of changes really. The big one that we spoke about last week was what would Auburn do at 41. This was previous to the coach being fired. So that obviously shook a lot of things up. I know I've seen a couple tweets from high recruits of theirs that kind of that helped their decision in not choosing Auburn, because they fired their coach in that process. So they still sit down there, which is not a great year for them in recruiting in the 2021 year. So definitely interesting, definitely something we'll continue to keep an eye on going into early next year and then signing day. And obviously we'll see what movement there is for these kids that have yet to sign yet. Not a lot of kids left really for these guys to sign. A lot of these teams are at 20 or above 20 commits. So yeah, we shouldn't see too much more movement, but we'll definitely keep an eye on it.
It's interesting that USC got kicked out of the top 10. I think that was a big move, honestly. But like you said, there's been some other movement at the top that's placed some teams higher, and there's a lot of things that go into these commits and decommits.
Yeah, I think it's something that we've continuously spoke about especially these local kids over on the East Coast or Alabama area, just being able to visit these schools, or how the recruiting processes work differently than in previous years, just with visits and how you can go kind of feel that experience of that school. And that may have affected USC a little bit, especially with getting kids across the country. So I know a lot of their commits are from the West Coast, Oregon area and California area. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. But those powerhouse schools in the top 10, it's tough to break into that top 10. And once you're there, I think it's tough to stay there as well, unless you're in that top 5, the Clemsons, the Georgias, the Ohios, and the Alabamas. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to keep an eye on.
I agree.
Hey, Samuel, the thing that I find kind of interesting is when you look at a program like Clemson sitting at number 5, the truth is they probably don't have any more room for any more commits than 18, because with a school like Clemson, those kids are not leaving there. So what happens is they only give 85 scholarships. So if you bring on 25 kids every year, that puts you at 100. So, there a lot of kids, they just don't leave Clemson. They promise them they'll get them an education. They promise them all this stuff. So some of these programs, kids will stay there, and there'll be some attrition. They'll leave for whatever reason. Not so much with a school like them. They probably are at 18, because that's probably all they had. That's all the spots they had available.
Yeah, no, I agree. And if you look at how their recruiting processes worked in comparison to the other top 10s, the amount of offers that they had sent out was significantly less than any other school. I think they were in the hundreds. Everyone else is in the 200 and 300. So their commit rates are a lot higher. Their conversion rate is a lot higher. And they're a lot more particular about the offers that they were sending out, because, like you said, they obviously knew that their commits, or the commits that they were going to bring in, were going to be slightly lower than these other schools that are in the low to mid 20s. So it's definitely a great point, and it's definitely interesting to see the strategy that they take when recruiting and sending out those offers, because that was definitely a school that we've watched throughout the year and have seen that then they're very, very, very particular about the offers that they're sending out.
Yeah, and they're getting top players too. I mean, these are top players all the way. I mean, they got 4 years of top players. They're just like Georgia, just like Alabama. Every year it's a top 5 recruiting class. So, the only way guys leave there is when they're not putting in the effort, and the coach meets with them and says, "Hey, we don't think we're going to have a spot for you next year because you're not competing at the highest level." So I think the other big one to kind of pop in was Arkansas at number 20. The fact that they did as well as they did this with their recruiting, with having a bad season, says a lot for them. Florida State also got back up. They're at number 22. They were number 30 last week, so they had a couple fall their way at the end. All that's typical stuff that happens. You don't. If you're on the coaching staff, you're not sure if those are going to fall your way or not. They got lucky, and they did. But I know that the Florida State fans are breathing a little bit better right now than they were 2 weeks ago. and the coaching staff sure is.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and that's something we discuss, right? Is that they're always going to be compared to University of Florida and Miami, and they're far behind them. But to close that gap slightly, like you said, it will be a little bit of a relief not only to the coaching staff but to the fans as well, because just bragging rights and knowing where the school sits right now, yeah, that they're going to feel a little bit easier.
The other big one that I thought was pretty big is Auburn. They fired their coach and they went up in the ranking 6 spots. So that's kind of, they went from 47 to 41. So they actually signed all those players, which is a pretty big deal when you fire the coach and still sign the players. But they held on to all 13 commits. And I heard the South Carolina coach talk about it, and he basically said that all the commits that they had, that they were all going to sign in February, but he basically talked to them and they went ahead and signed early. So I think he got 9 to commit, but Auburn didn't even have a head coach in place. I mean, I guess Steele is there as the interim head coach. Maybe they just worked it pretty hard, but most likely that staff will be gone from Auburn. So the fact that they were still able to get 13 guys, that's pretty strong.
Yeah, and especially with how unsuccessful their recruiting has been in 2021.
Yeah.
Like you said, they've been around the 40s for the majority of the year. And we did discuss last week how there was 3 guys that were we were looking at that 24/7 had predicted would commit there, and then as soon as signing day's rolling around, they fire the coach. And I seen the tweet from one of these kids that kind of alluded to the fact that that was now not a choice for him because the coach had been fired. So it's definitely interesting how that works. It's what do? Do you keep a coach who's been unsuccessful right now to help these kids commit for the future, or do you just completely restart? And Auburn obviously have chosen, they've had a bad recruiting year, they've had a bad year on the field. We're going to completely clean the slate and restart and kind of start off with a new staff and go from there. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how they do with 2022 and 2023. We'll definitely keep an eye on that because they'll want some bounce back years for sure.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is with a school like Auburn is they're not going to give out that 7-year contract again. I don't think you should give anybody longer than a 3-year contract because they're not going to leave if they're doing well. You just pay them a little bit more money. But these long 5-6-year contracts, they're just too big. And I think sometimes these coaches get too fat and happy. They got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, go ahead and fire me. Write me a check. They got to pay him $10 million in the first 30 days. So,
Yeah.
he's, I'm sure that he's sad that he's having to leave, but I'm sure that he's also very happy he's leaving with a big check.
Yeah, it's you put yourself in a win-win situation, right? It's like, well, I could spend 6 years here and get paid and be successful, or if it doesn't go my way, I spend 3 years here or whatever and still get a big check and move on my way as well. So I think that's a lesson learned for a lot of these schools now. It's like, well, let's keep it to a short contract. Let's make sure that we're not tying our hands up so we can move on if needs be.
Yeah. And the reality is that you don't know what it's going to be like in 2 years. It's really comes back to the recruiting, and so and that's what we're looking at here. So I think it's an awesome report. Appreciate everything you're doing with that, and we'll catch it again as we get closer to February. These numbers will change again, and some of these spots will close. We looked at our Blue 57 board, and for the 9 states that we cover, for the guys in the 2021 class, 80% of them have committed to a school. So we're still looking at about 20% that have not committed. So that's still a decent amount of kids. So like you alluded to, they're not going to be going to these top 20 schools because they're already at 20 plus kids. They're full. So it's going to be for the schools further down and more Group 5 schools.
Yep, absolutely. We'll definitely keep an eye on it, and we'll do another report to keep everyone updated on that.
All right. Thank you, Samuel.
Thank you.
Be safe. So, Lexus, it's pretty interesting how some of these schools some of these guys they really put the gas on, and they got some players at the end. I can only imagine what some of those phone calls were about and what was being said, but I'm sure that it got pretty hot and heavy at the very end for some of those players. And I'm sure most of those guys are glad to be done with this process. Sign the paperwork, turn it in, and start preparing. So some of these kids will be going to school, and technically they'll be starting school in 3 weeks. January 5th, they'll be headed off to college. So they're graduating from high school early and headed off. So decent amount of these kids will be doing that. So it's be a pretty big change from high school to college.
Yeah, a big transition, especially right now with the times that we're in, starting online classes. I don't know about next semester for all colleges. Hopefully some of them get to get that real experience, and some of them didn't even get to tour the school, but hopefully they get something.
Man, I know that some of the kids were doing virtual tours, so they had an online experience set up for them. It's nothing like seeing it in person, but they're doing anything they can to let them see what it is up close. But no, like you said, it's nothing like getting on campus and seeing it. The truth is, you really can't go wrong with any of these Power 5 schools. Multi-million-dollar programs, very nice facilities. They got all the resources, so you can't make a bad decision, truthfully.
You really can't. And those, like you said, multi-million-dollar schools, they're putting in so much funding into all their facilities. These kids, they're in for a really nice time, really great experience.
Yeah, a lot of value there, a lot of positive experiences, and so yeah, it's a whole new world for a lot of those kids, and it should be. They've worked really hard, and they've earned the right to get the scholarship and to get access to those resources. So it's a good thing. So Lexus, appreciate you coming on with us for this Top 20 show and just kind of following up with this. We'll hit it again next week and talk about some more sports psychology, try to figure out what's going on with some of these players, why they made their decisions, and we'll keep talking about recruiting and scouting.
Thank you for having me. We had great insight from Samuel. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Blue57. And if you like what you see, like and subscribe. Thank you.